Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Rundown. I will be your host today, Craig DeLuz, coming at you from the West Coast, the left coast, behind the Iron Curtain, otherwise known as the Sierras. And today is Throat Punch Thursday.
Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Who's ready?
It's Throat Punch Thursday, bitch.
Gotta love that. Throat Punch Thursday. This is where we take on the tough issues, right? Where we take on folks who tend to disagree with us. Whether you like us or not, we don't care. Anyway, we're going to have a good old time today. Mike is not going to be able to make it today. Got called in on a project, but he has promised me he will be here for Free for All Friday. So it's just going to be us today going through and discussing the news today. So let's get into it. We're going to start off the way that we usually do, and that is with a quick shout out to our sponsors. We're going to start with the folks over at Hitman Industries. Now, Hitman Industries makes rifle and pistol caliber barrels. They're available for you to purchase at any length. Now, they have a bunch of other barrels, not just AR barrels. They got shotgun barrels, they have handgun barrels, folks. They have all the different types of barrels that you could possibly use. So that when you get ready to do your next project, start your experience with Hitman Industries. Then we've got the California Republican Assembly working to help elect conservatives, not just Republicans, but conservatives at all levels of government, from school board all the way up to President of the United States. Ronald Reagan once referred to CRA as the conscience of the Republican Party. You need to find out why. How are you going to do it? All you have to do is visit their website at cragop.org. That's cragop.org. If you want to be a part of California's future today, you got to join CRA. Then we've got the best in concealed carry tactical holsters available on the market. You will find them at Hawg Holsters. That's HAWG holsters.com. Now, why is it spelled that way? Because they like helping Americans wear guns. They like it so much, they're going to give you a discount. If you use the discount code, The Rundown, all caps, no spaces, one word, just like it is right up there, you're going to get your Hawg holster on discount today. And then finally, it's about that time, folks. It's about that time to upgrade your gear. And the place you need to start, the place you need to go, matter of fact, the only place you need to go is uscombatgear.com. They have a huge selection of stuff. They have everything from hats, they got boots, they got pants, they got backpacks, they got optics, they got ears, they have the whole shebangy bang. And by the way, they specialize in group sales. So get your agency together, get your group together, get your Boy Scout troop together, and get on over to uscombatgear.com, the place where you can find all things tactical except the gun. And then finally, want to remind you once again, if you haven't already done so, you need to subscribe to the 2A newsletter. This is the place to get all of your Second Amendment news in one spot. By the way, that one spot, it ain't online. That one spot is right in your email box on the daily basis. Everything coming from the Second Amendment media, everything coming from the mainstream media, any cool videos that are out there, blogs, any new reviews of products. Folks, they have the whole thing right there at 2anews.us. Just go to 2anews.us, hit the subscribe button. You see it right there at the top. Hit that subscribe button, put in your email address. Now, let me remind you, because I keep seeing that a lot of you have subscribed, but you didn't do the confirmation. Folks, I want to make sure that you want to be on this list. I don't want to put people on this list who don't want to be on the list, right? If you're like me, I don't want to get emails that I'm never going to read. So you got to confirm. So you're going to get a follow-up email to confirm that, yes, you do want to be a part of the 2A newsletter. Please go ahead and confirm, and don't just email me saying, hey, why am I not getting my newsletter? Not saying, just saying. Go ahead, subscribe today. And then finally, want to remind you folks that if you're watching the show during the 3 o'clock hour on the West Coast or during the 6 o'clock hour on the East Coast, you are watching us live. And if you are watching us live, well, we're taking your comments. I'm looking right over here. I'm looking for the stuff that is interesting, the stuff that you guys, the comments that you guys have where you're talking to us about where you're watching the program, all that fun stuff. It's going to be right here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to share it with our audience as long as it's interesting. Now, one of the best ways to be interesting is to disagree. So if you're someone who disagrees, you go straight to the front of the line because, well, we enjoy mocking you.
Oh, wow, is that a mockingbird?
Man, is that a mockingbird? Is that a mockingbird?
As Mike would say, we will mock you. All right, let's go ahead and get into today's news. We're going to start with a a little conference that's taking place. It's taking place in Washington, D.C., and it's featuring about 65 different countries. And it's really talking about the rising threat of far left political extremism, right? I know, you're right. Wait, what? Yes, far left political extremism. I know it sounds weird because the mainstream media doesn't talk anything about it. They're not reporting on all of the acts of terrorism that are taking place, or the stabbings that are taking place. They're not talking about the stuff that's going on in England. They're not talking about the stuff that's going on in Germany. They're not talking about the stuff that's going on in France or in Italy or in Greece. They're not talking about any of it. They're not talking about any of it because they don't want to admit something, and that is that so much of this violence is coming from the far left. You know, the people that they tend to, soft pedal the news for. Well, Marco Rubio kicked off this conference by basically laying down, I don't want to say the law, but basically by laying out exactly what the threat we're talking about is.
Doctrine has had a blind spot when it comes to extremist violence from the political left. Even today, the very idea that far-left terrorism could be a serious threat is treated as a right-wing fever dream, or worse, as a dangerous fascist conspiracy. It's treated this way by many in the press, by many in academia and our universities, and by many of our legacy institutions. You will no doubt see the dogma rear its head in the coverage of this very conference. In spite of the clear and the undeniable reality, in spite of the objective numbers and statistics, in spite of the fact that in this room today, there are representatives from across the political spectrum, we will hear that this kind of organized violence and terror will be dismissed. It will be dismissed as a partisan fiction. A whole industry grew up in our countries around the study of extremism. We have think tanks and fellowships and journals and consultancies with the unspoken understanding among them that the only kind of political violence that was a true threat to our system, that only one kind of political violence was a true threat to the system. A bomb planted by a neo-Nazi group was a nefarious and murderous act of evil. It is. But a bomb planted by a Marxist revolutionary, well, that's just merely a tragic excess of idealism. Perhaps its means were misplaced or overzealous, but its ends were virtuous and just. That's the implication of how they treat it. For years, this extraordinary ideological prejudice was embedded in the way we talked about political violence and extremism. It was repeated again and again until it was accepted as the neutral and objective baseline, so entrenched in the mainstream conventional wisdom that it came to be regarded as an apolitical fact. It is the reason why, here in my country, so many people in positions of power have repeatedly dismissed acts of violence and even terrorism as legitimate forms of political expression, so long as they served a left-wing cause. It is why during those so-called George Floyd riots in the summer of 2020, as criminals and extremists burned and looted their way through America's great cities and nearly brought the country to its knees, city governments all across the country simply refused to prosecute the people conducting these acts of violence and terror. It is the reason.
And I want you to think about that, right? I want you to just close and think about that. As much of a big deal, and it was a big deal. January 6th was a huge deal, but as big of a deal as they still make of January 6th today, think about how little of a deal that they made of the George Floyd riots, of the riots that took place during the summer of 2020. Keep in mind, nobody died as a result of January 6th, except for Ashley Babbitt, who was shot by a Capitol Police officer, a Trump supporter shot by a Capitol Police officer. Yet 25 people died as a result of the George Floyd riots. Billions of dollars in damage to government property and as well as private property. Thousands of officers were injured during those riots. And yet the best that the media could come up with was that they were quote unquote mostly peaceful protests. Yeah, especially you might remember this, the CNN reporter standing in front of or standing with a burning car in the background, right, as protesters were rioting, saying basically referring to them as mostly peaceful protests. Well, those aren't the only protests that, once again, that we're talking about here. Rubio and one of the things they're going to be talking about is they're going to be pointing to some of these various different instances that occurred. It says here, administration officials point to a series of recent attacks in Europe that they argue underscore the need for greater international cooperation. On July 1st, coordinated firebomb attacks targeted homes of members of Greece's governing New Democracy Party, killing the mother of a parliamentary candidate and injuring 4 others. Greek anti-terrorism police later arrested 3 suspects. In January, an arson attack on a power transmission facility in Berlin, Germany, knocked out electricity to tens of thousands of homes and businesses. German authorities later transferred the investigation to the federal prosecutor who suspected involvement by terrorist organizations. The meeting builds on a series of actions the administration has taken since late 2025, including designating 4 far-left organizations as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists, along with offering a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the disruption of their financial networks. Officials also disputed reports that foreign partners are reluctant to participate, saying several governments approached the United States seeking to join the initiative after recognizing similar trends within their own borders. So in other words, people are going to try and tell you, oh, well, no one wants to be a part of this, and this is just a Trump thing. The reality is, there have been tons of attacks and riots. And by the way, these organizations, these efforts are all funded by a lot, and in many cases, the same people. Some of the organizations that they're referring to, here's just 4 of them. There's Antifa Ost, there's the Informal Antichrist Federation International Revolution Front, Armed Proletariat, Justice and Revolutionary Class Self-Defense. And these, once again, these are just folks on the international side. There are also folks here in the United States, organizations in the United States that have been designated as domestic terrorist organizations. And one of the things that this allows them to do is to investigate and interrupt their financial networks. And these organizations are oftentimes funded by, well, I hate to say this, they're funded by far leftists here in the United States. They're funded by far leftists in Europe. And they're oftentimes that are funded by organizations, nonprofit organizations that are raising money tax-free in order to, quote unquote, provide a public good. Well, if you're providing a public good, I'm assuming that firebombing, I'm assuming that throwing fireworks at law enforcement, I'm assuming that throwing frozen water bottles and rocks at law enforcement is not included among the public good that we want our taxpayer dollars to be funding, or at least that you should be receiving tax credits for. How about that? You shouldn't be receiving tax refunds for that kind of work. In any case, it is a real thing. And it is something that is rooted largely in efforts that are fomenting here in the United States. The same people who are involved in the Democratic Socialists of America, and I'm not saying the leadership, but I'm saying that there are people who are funding the Democratic Socialists of America who are the same people who are funding these organizations. They may not necessarily, they may be passing it through shell organizations. They may be funding it thinking they're funding, they may even be funding it thinking there's something that's nonviolent and just kind of helping people out. But nonetheless, this is where these resources are coming from. And one of the reasons why they're doing this conference is because they want these countries to do their homework, right? They want to talk about, number one, the importance of recognizing this. And then number 2, do your homework, right? Look into the organizations. And by the way, let me just say this. If there are extremist Republican or extremist conservative organizations that are involved in violence, they need to be investigated too. They need to be going after them because, this only works if we are able to have open and honest discussion and debate and disagree, go to the ballot box, go to the vote, and whatever side wins, wins. That's the only way this system holds up. And if people are doing what they're doing under the threat of violence, then the system isn't working, right? The system is not working if people who are making key decisions are making decisions because they're afraid that someone is going to engage in violence against them or against their constituents or against the community at large. This stuff has to stop. And the people who are engaged in it, let's just be honest, they're not looking for a particular policy outcome. They're looking for anarchy. Their goal is to tear down our form of government. Their goal is to tear down our economy. They do not want a democratic government. They do not want a democratically elected government. They do not want a free market economy. What they want is for a handful of people who they deem to be the experts, who are their folks, to be making the decisions. The decisions about what, Craig? The decisions about the economy, the decisions about what we're going to produce, the decisions about how we are going to handle the means of production, the decisions about what your kids are going to learn in school, the decisions about what you can and you cannot say in the public square, the decisions about, who is, what are acceptable beliefs. Those are the decisions that they want to make. I'm not saying that's everybody on the left, but I am saying that that's the goal of these people, these anarchists, these people who are part of Antifa, these people who are part of the neo-Marxist left, because they believe that once they've torn everything down, right? This is the believing of the Marxists, right? That out of the ashes like a phoenix will rise this new thing. Nobody can tell you what this new thing is. Nobody can tell you how this new thing is going to be different, except that everybody's going to be equal. And nobody will tell you what has happened every single time this has been tried. Every single time that this has been tried, people have died. Millions of people, hundreds of millions of people have died every time it's been tried. I won't say people have died every time. Sometimes hundreds of millions of people have died. And in the end, the people are more equal because most of the people are living in abject poverty. A greater percentage of the people are living in abject poverty, with the exception of the experts, the people that the revolutionaries wanted to be in charge so that they could make everything fair and equal. The people who were bringing equity. Yeah, they're the ones that are doing well. I was listening today and I realized, a lot of people don't know, like Che Guevara, the guy they see on all the t-shirts, him and Fidel Castro used to walk around. These were quote unquote revolutionaries. While the rest of Cuba was in poverty, they would walk around with these very, very expensive Rolex watches because they were living in wealth while their people were living in squalor. And that is usually how socialism works. If anyone tries to tell you, oh, well, the Netherlands, no. Scandinavian countries, no. Denmark, no. They all tried socialism. And it was an abject failure, almost ruined their economies. And what did they do? They became free market economies. Now, they're called free market social economies. Anyway, they have a big social safety net. I mean, their taxes are high on everybody, by the way. They don't just tax the rich, they tax everybody, right? And they have a huge social safety net, but their economy is a free market economy. Anyway, all that to say, these folks right here, folks, and once again, this is who the far left is. And I don't want you to confuse far left with traditional Democrats. Now, there are some Democrats who are in bed with the far left. But no, most Democrats really want, they're like this. Look, they want to make sure that people are given opportunities. We disagree with them over how big a role government should play in our daily lives, more so than the left. But for the most part, they still believe in our system, our form of government. They still believe in having the debate, putting it to a vote, right? And you know, you don't have to like the decision to have to live with the decision. That's your traditional Democrat. But that's not who these folks are. That is not who these folks are. Trust me, they need to be stopped. And quite frankly, initially, the main folks who need to be doing the stopping are, well, our friends on the left, our friends in the Democratic Party. I'm hoping they're listening. Oh, there's going to be a speech tonight. And Donald Trump is going to be doing a national address. And as a part of this national address, he said he's going to be addressing a few things. And one of them is going to be the 2020 election. Now, if you are like me, I'm just going to be honest, I don't know how much more I want to hear about the 2020 election. The reason why I say I don't want to hear more about it is I want to see the receipts, right? There are certain aspects of the 2020 election I am 100% sure, no, they cheated. And when I say they cheated, I think some of it's the obvious stuff, and they may disagree that it is quote-unquote cheating. I think changing the rules in the middle of the election is cheating. I think changing the rules in such a way that is contrary to the Constitution, where bodies who really weren't granted the authority to change how federal elections were done, I think that's wrong. I think changing the rules in such a way that in many cases affected the ability to verify valid votes is 100% wrong. And you know, I think a media that was 100%, well, not 100%, 90% in the tank for one political candidate over the other, I think that's just wrong. And I think that in a media that's supposed to be objective, wasn't. And, well, isn't, but most especially wasn't. Now, that's not what he's going to be talking about. I'm real interested to see what receipts he's planning on bringing tonight. I'm not hopeful, to be honest. And I really do wish the conversation, I'll put it this way. If he's not bringing the receipts, he really probably shouldn't be doing it. And that's all I'm going to say. But here's what they had to say over at the White House when it comes to what he's going to be talking about, why he's going to be talking about it.
Garrett.
Caroline, welcome back.
Good to see you.
Likewise. So to the degree that this speech tonight is about elections past, not elections upcoming, the 2020 election has had dozens of recounts, lawsuits, audits. 2024 election, widely believed to be safe and secure. There's not really any question about that. A lot of people look at this.
Because it was too big to rig.
Well, I think a lot of people look at this
There's a
and
massive amount of votes for this president. That's why he's in the Oval Office right now.
No one disputes that. And there were a significant amount of votes for Joe Biden, who won in 2020. I mean, I think the question is, why is the president unable to let this go?
Well, first of all, Garrett, I think part of the problem is that the media has refused to acknowledge that tens of millions of Americans across the country share the concerns of this president about the sanctity of our elections. And your premise of your question, you're jumping ahead to a conclusion in this speech before even hearing it yourself. I think that everyone should tune in tonight, including the people in this room, and you should report on the president's speech and the findings that he is going to reveal in this speech with a little bit of honesty and a little bit of integrity, because it will shock you if you have an honest eye listening to the president tonight, and everything he is saying will be backed by facts and by evidence that will be provided this evening. And again, Garrett, I think all Americans, Democrat, Republican, should agree that we are the greatest country in the history of the world. We should have the safest and most secure elections in the history of the world. And what the president will be speaking about tonight will show you that perhaps that is not the case, and we need to make some adjustments moving forward, including the Save America Act, as Rachel pointed out, is a key legislative priority for this president on Capitol Hill, and he wants to see all senators and members of Congress voting in favor of the Save America Act, because it's crucially important as we move forward. Aisha.
All right, so if he wants to know why people have a skeptical eye, and I don't think people should go through it with an honest eye. I think people should look at it with an objective eye, to be willing to take a look at the facts and the information provided. The challenge is that so far, we're talking 6 years later, the accusations that have been made, other than the ones that I mentioned earlier, you know, why is it taking so long? I mean, we're talking now, he's been president for over a year, and it's taken a while to get through this stuff. I'm just saying, a lot of people are just frustrated because they haven't seen the evidence. So if he were to come out with information and evidence, it wouldn't be the first time that I've been wrong about this president. But all I know is if maybe, just maybe, the president had spent less time focusing on talking about it and more time on putting together the evidence and then later coming back, people might be a little bit more likely to have an objective ear. But, you know, I hate to say this, and I'm not saying that he was crying wolf, but he was definitely selling some wolf tickets. And so far, ain't nobody seen a wolf. You know, I think there are areas of the election that he could have spent more time focusing on and talking about that he didn't. The rumors are, I hear that he believes that Maduro had something to do with it, or Maduro has some evidence relating to this. That's some of the things that some of the folks on the left are speculating. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be paying much attention tonight, because here's the deal. All I'm going to hear is what I'm going to hear from him. And Donald Trump doesn't give a lot of specifics. And when he does, they're generally not very clear. But I do know that afterwards, there's probably going to be a data dump. There will be a launch and an introduction. I will bet you anything of a website of where you can go and you can look at the information and the data. And that's going to be the stuff to take a look at. That's going to be, because a lot of times, I hate to say this, a lot of times I have to listen to what he says and then I have to go back and look at the data and the information, and then I have to go back and dig through the information and go back and listen to what he said and pull it all out. So I don't know. We shall see. It'll be interesting. I know it's definitely going to be worth watching for some folks. Me, not so much. I'll watch it. I'm just probably not gonna watch it live. So somebody out there gonna look at me, whoa, Craig, you should look. If you're not gonna watch it live, I'm not gonna watch it live. How about that? Anyway, so we got anybody? No comments. Okay, so y'all must agree with me then. Good. I like that. I like it best when y'all agree with me. Although sometimes having the opportunity to mock you is also kind of fun. All right. Next thing. This being a midterm election, one would think, right now I know that the generic polls, the generic partisan polls, basically Republican versus Democrat, Democrats are winning in most of the generic polls. But one of the things that's starting to creep up is Democrats are having a very difficult time raising money. They're having and not only are they having a difficult time raising money, but their opponents, Republicans, are actually raising money hand over foot. In fact, Politico referred to it as House Dem challengers are printing money. Let's read a little bit of that piece from over at Politico. It says here, Democratic challengers in several key U.S. House races put up massive fundraising numbers in the second quarter, closing some of the GOP's cash advantage in battlegrounds across the country. 7 of the 10 best fundraising House candidates across the competitive districts were Democratic challengers, according to a Politico review of filings submitted to the Federal Election Commission late on Wednesday. All 7 outraised GOP incumbents they are facing in the second quarter. Okay, I misread this one. So they're saying that the number one people they're saying the people who are raising money are Democrat challengers. They're saying people who are raising the money aren't Democrat incumbents. They aren't Republican incumbents. They're the people that are challenging the Democratic incumbents. Are they part of the Democratic Socialists of America? Are they the people who are running against incumbent Democrats? Are they the people who are part of this new DSA Marxist cabal, the people who are part of story number 1, the rise of the poisonous far left terror masking themselves as equality? One has to wonder. They're obviously part of the anti-Israel crowd. They're obviously part of the environmentalist crowd. They're obviously part of the LGBTQIA plus minus divided by sign, whatever. I mean, they're definitely part of these groups. And the reason why they're raising money so much is because so many billionaires are putting money in their pockets. A lot of the fundraising, this is the thing a lot of people don't realize about a lot of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, their leadership and most of their activists are wealthy college-educated, many people who actually inherited their wealth, but they're the well-to-do. They are the people who will be part of the proletariat. Would it be the proletariat? They're going to be part of the ruling class should the neo-Marxism, the new Marxism, the phoenix rise out of the ashes, should capitalism be taken down. And the reason why it's kind of interesting, in particular when you're dealing with them, is because these are not the people who earned the money. These are the people who inherited the money, right? They're the ones who inherited it, and they don't really know how money is made. And so as soon as they are in charge, they're going to figure out real quick that money doesn't just make itself. I know some people tend to think that it does, but it does not. In any case, that is interesting. So I assume they were talking about Republicans. They're not. They're talking about internal challengers. Ooh. Now this is getting even more interesting. And here they have a list of the folks here who are some of the folks that are challenging. Eugene Vindman. You have Sarah Tron Garat. You have Joanna Mendoza. Yeah, all of these folks. I'm going to take some time and I'm going to look up these folks and see how many of these folks are they're either part of the DSA or they are part of the far left. If you are taking on a sitting incumbent, then you are not a part of the establishment Democratic Party. And don't get me wrong, the establishment Democratic Party is plenty left. They are plenty left. In fact, in many cases, they have moved further left in order to appease the DSA, the socialist crowd. For one, Joe Biden's probably a great example. You can look at his political record and you can realize historically he was a moderate. His term as president was not moderate at all. But then again, he had to become more moderate he had to become more left in order to win the support of the DSA crowd. By the way, going back to the last story, when you talk about elections, I'm still wondering, where did the 20 million votes go? Because I want you to think about this. The most votes before or since for a Democratic presidential candidate, the most votes before that, before he got elected, were 64 million votes. 64 million votes. Joe Biden, of all people, Joe Biden, not Barack Obama, not Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, got 85 million votes. 85 million votes. 20 million more than the next highest vote getter ever. Well, 10 million more because Donald Trump got in the second. I think he got like 70 or 75 million, 74 million, something like that. Then fast forward to 2024, 65 million for Kamala. Back to a normal number. Once again, I'm not saying that there is causation. I'm not saying that there's correlation. I'm just saying it is a heck of a coinky-dink. Not saying, just saying, and nobody's been able to explain where those 20 million votes went. Once again, not saying. I'm just saying you got to admit that if that does not raise an eyebrow, nothing will raise an eyebrow in your eyes. You've just decided, yeah, I'm going to believe whatever it is I'm going to believe, right? Right. Okay, moving right along. House bill barring a gun retail tracking codes passes the House. And this is being reported by the folks over at The Reload. Stephen Gutowski, a good friend, used to be over at the Free Beacon, is writing in this piece. It says, your credit card companies may soon be forced to eliminate specialized merchant codes for gun dealers. On Tuesday, House of Representatives passed H.R. 1181, the Protecting Privacy in Purchases Act, or PPA. That bill would ban financial institutions from using Merchant Category Codes, MCC, unique to gun retailers. The bill was passed on a vote 221 to 201, was backed by 5 Democrats and all but 1 Republican. Quote, law-abiding gun owners should not have their purchases tracked just because they are exercising their Second Amendment rights. Representative Richard Hudson, a Republican from North Carolina, who co-sponsored the bill, said in a statement. The bill's passage is the latest milestone in a long-running fight over the use of credit card tracking codes, which kicked off after a New York Times columnist suggested they could be used to prevent mass shootings back in 2018. States on either side of the political divide have passed dueling laws on credit card companies' use of the specialized MCC codes for gun retailers. H.R. 1181 could settle that fight once and for all if it can make it through the Senate and into law. The fight began after Andrew Ross Sorkin documented several cases of high-profile mass shooters using credit cards or debit cards to purchase the guns and ammunition used in their attacks in a piece for the Times. He argued that credit card companies should attach specific MCCs to gun stores in an effort to track gun sales and report suspicious purchasing patterns to law enforcement. However, spending data from MCCs is not granular. It can generally track the total amount spent on a category of retailer, which is how credit card companies tend to use it for points tracking. But it does not provide those companies with detailed insight into exactly what was purchased. So a gun retailer, MCC, can give insight into how much money a cardholder has spent at a store that sells firearms, but not how much of that was actually spent on firearms. And that's one of the things that's vitally important to note in this, because if I go in, and here's the thing they wanted to do, because some of these companies, some of them, what they wanted to do was they wanted to be able to reject sales. So if I go into a gun store and I want to use my credit card to purchase a gun, they want to be able to reject the sale. But they can't track it just to a specific item. So what if I went there to purchase t-shirts? If I purchase t-shirts from there, maybe I want to buy pro Second Amendment t-shirts. I can't buy a t-shirt from there using my credit cards. Which basically in other words, what you're doing is you're affecting an entire industry and their ability to be able to conduct business the same way other retailers would. And when and if those retailers go out of business, because who accepts cash now? I'm sure they will accept cash, but a lot of people go and do their purchases because they want to get the points, they want to use a debit card. Who walks around with that much cash? Not a lot of people. And so you want to affect their ability to be able to do business. Well, if you affect their ability to do business, some of them are going to go out of business. If they go out of business, you're affecting the ability of law-abiding citizens to exercise a fundamental right. Now, for those who are not interested in the Second Amendment, that's their goal. They figure if you have no place to buy a gun, then you have no place to get a gun. If you have no place to get a gun, then you won't have a gun. And they believe that that will make the community safer. Now, they don't address the fact that the criminals still have guns. The criminals can still get guns. And when the criminals know that you can't get a gun, that then that increases the likelihood that you will become a victim of gun crime. It's a simple law of supply and demand. They will know. And when they know, they will make sure you know that they know. Because, well, let's just be honest, they're going to come after you. And they do. I've already talked about how, people generally tend to go after soft targets. Because, look, criminals don't want to get shot any more than anyone else does. So they tend to go after groups and individuals, they tend to go places where they know are going to be soft targets, where they know people are not going to be armed. And home invasion robberies, for example, when they did the buyback in Australia, home invasion robberies went through the roof. Rape went through the roof because people knew that it was a disarmed citizenry. Now, those facts may not matter to people who just don't feel comfortable around guns. They don't feel comfortable because people have guns. Now, what they don't know is the criminals always had guns, always will have guns. Maybe they don't know it or they just don't care. Anyway, in any case, their positions are not based on fact, they're based on feelings. And I will always be one who will advocate public policy be based on fact, not feelings. All right, folks, that now brings us to our parting shots. Parting shots are brought to you by Hog Holsters. Just go to hogholsters.com. Use the discount code The Rundown, all caps, no spaces, one word, and get yours on Get yours on discount today. All of our parting shots today are going to be brought to you by the Babylon Bee. Fake news that you can trust. All right, this first one here. Biden heralded as first president to author his memoir posthumously. Well, because we all know. Well, I guess does being brain dead count as dead? I don't know. That is the crux of that joke. They have Hegseth orders military personnel with low testosterone to be transferred to the Navy. Now, I have to admit, this is a funny joke, and I don't know exactly why it's funny. Well, I know why it's funny. The premise behind this one is evidently they're doing testosterone testing now for the military. So I don't know why, but anyway, it's a no. If you don't like the Navy, it's a Navy joke. Anyway, here we go. Explosive diarrhea epidemic traced to gain of function lab at Taco Bell Institute. Ooh, wow. Yeah, y'all. I'm sure y'all have heard about the lettuce and the pre-made salads that may be causing explosive diarrhea. Well, now we know what the source is. It was not a Wuhan lab. It was a Taco Bell. It was the Taco Bell Institute. Also along the same line, CDC advises those with diarrhea parasite to stay within 6 feet of toilet. Okay, I've had a I ain't gonna lie. I've had a case of the mud butt, as whatchamacallit would call it, or bubble guts, as I would call it. And yeah, I've been there where you don't want to be more than 6 feet away from the toilet. You definitely know. And then finally, this shows another epidemic. But here's the thing. This one at least links it to something so that you can tell exactly a good way to avoid this. This study shows mysterious link between trying to run over an ICE agent and bullets striking your windshield. I wonder what that link is. Some folks just won't get it. Anyway, all right, folks, that now brings us to the end of our program. But before we go, we're going to do one more quick shout out to our sponsors. We've got the folks over at Hitman Industries, rifle and pistol caliber barrels available for you to purchase at any length at hitmanindustries.net. The California Republican Assembly, the conscience of the Republican Party. Visit them at cragop.org. We've got the best in concealed carry tactical holsters available on the market at hogholsters.com. That's HAWG holsters.com, helping Americans wear guns. And then finally, the place where you can find all things tactical except the gun, that would be at uscombatgear.com. And that is going to be it for today's program. We very much appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program and encouraging your friends to do the same. We will be back. Hopefully Mike and I will be back tomorrow on Free for All Friday. Till then, y'all have fun, stay safe, and we will see you mañana.